All right, welcome to Finance Essentials with Danny Hudson. I am your host, Danny Hudson, and here today we are doing episode 4 of Entrepreneur Month, and we are actually joined by Chef Andrew Gruel. You guys may know him from being all over TV recently with a fundraiser that he's been doing to help raise money for laid off, furloughed, other hospitality people that aren't necessarily being able to go to work because of lockdowns and other economic conditions. But so Chef Andrew, he is the owner of Slapfish. Is it Slapfish Ownership Group?
Slapfish Restaurant Group.
Slapfish Restaurant Group, and they currently have 27 locations all over the country. And one of the things that I had mentioned to Chef was that as a UCF alumni, my wife and I, we lived in Orlando for 10 years. And I don't know how long the restaurant has been in Waterford Lakes. It certainly wasn't there when we lived there. But if you're listening and you're in the UCF area, in the Orlando area, please go check it out. I want to hear reviews. I want to hear everything. I want to see pictures. I want you guys to be able to support Chef in every way that you can. And so welcome to the show. It's great to have you on, and how have things been as far as the restaurants? I can't imagine trying to manage 27 of them at one time.
No, thank you so much for having me on. So we own 6 in Southern California. The 7th is in Northern California. Actually, 7, there's one at LAX, and then the others around the country are all independently owned and operated. So it's a franchise license deal.
Gotcha.
Obviously, we do a lot of work on a grand scale in terms of giving them all the menu design specs, et cetera, the kind of calculus of a franchise system. But each one of those stores is all independently owned and operated. So for example, in Waterford Lakes, you've got father, son that own it, operating partners, great independent owners. So they deal with certain things there that maybe another franchisee in Indiana may not deal with. Gotcha. And then we're on top of it all to make sure that we can pull it all together.
Excellent. That makes sense. And I know too, from doing a little bit of research, I believe it actually started as a food truck, right? You guys started as a food truck and then kind of expanded from there. When you were doing that and operating that, did you ever anticipate that you would be at the position that you are now?
No, I mean, when I was running a food truck, all I was thinking about was, getting gas and ice for the next stop.
Right. That's fair. Or figuring out where the good spaces are at the lunch shift and who's going to have a long line and where the other competitors are, so you can make sure that you're able to maximize your revenues, right?
Certainly.
Yeah, perfect. So one of the things that I was reading is that you grew up in New Jersey. And now, how long were you in Jersey growing up? Because my guess is at some point in time in your childhood is something clicked in your head and you were like, I want to work in the food industry, because no one ever goes into the food industry and works in, the highest turnover industry, the most chaotic, for a little money, unless there's something that clicked in their head, right? That really kind of drove that desire.
Yeah, that, or there's just a screw loose.
Yeah, that's fair. Both, maybe.
Certainly. No. So I grew up in Jersey. I left Jersey when I was 17, 18 to go to college. I went to a small liberal arts college up in Maine, actually. Yep. But I started working in the restaurant industry when I was about 14, 15 in New Jersey. Started with a small catering company that a friend of mine's mother owned. And then I proceeded to go and work at a large 5-star, 5-diamond hotel, washing dishes, waiting tables, sure. scrubbing potatoes, peeling potatoes, moving down that road. And, but just always had a love of food. My father was in a very subsidiary way, was involved in food and hotels. So he always took me traveling with him. Right. And that gave me the opportunity to understand different, small independent tastes and feels in the restaurant industry all over the US, et cetera. So, there was a lot of different elements that kind of layer in to create the demand, create the drive.
Sure. No, that's awesome. And one of the things too, I also read in your bio is that you had also worked like the overnight shift at Denny's at one point in time. Is that correct?
Well, yeah. Well, I remember there was an author that came and spoke at our school when I was like 12 or 13, and his lead in to all the students was that he originally wanted to be a chef. And when he spoke to a chef friend of his, they said, well, if you actually want to be a chef, the only way to really get your chops in is to work at a diner, right. Work an overnight shift, right? And I remember that had always kind of stuck in my mind. So when I went up to college and I was working and I was living up there and I needed to make money, obviously to have spending money, et cetera, I did apply for a job at a Denny's. It was the closest thing to a diner in where I lived in Maine.
Sure,
And,
sure.
all they had available was the overnight shift. So I started pulling shifts, the overnight shift at a Denny's, and
Right.
it was exactly as the guy explained. I mean, it's like that's where you learn your chops. That's where you learn
Yeah.
how to push through the rush.
Right. And my guess too is that there's probably a humbleness too that you probably learn working at a place like that, where you're turning over $6, $7, and you're working with people that typically tend to have a very different thought process and mentality that you would have at an audience at a 5-star restaurant.
Mhm.
Um, I'm assuming were there also a lot of things that you learned that you still apply to, whether it's relationships with your staff or how you manage to operate your restaurants now, that you actually carried over from that time period?
Of course, of course. It's all about the stories. It's the people that work within the restaurant industry. So this is really, in my mind, the only industry where you have hundreds, thousands of people from different walks of life, all working under the same roof,
Right.
driving for the service, right? But when they leave the restaurants, they all go into different areas. If we're all working in finance, for example, it's kind of like a niche,
Sure.
right? We're all finance guys. If we all work within the entertainment industry, everyone can kind of speak the same language. When it comes to food and restaurants, it's always a stepping stone career. And that's
Yeah.
what makes it difficult, but that's what also makes it exciting.
Sure.
So you have people from all different walks of life trying to add a little bit of extra pocket money or use it as a stepping stone. You get everybody's stories. They're all so different. And
Right.
most of the time, or a lot of the times, you have foreign workers, people who have just made it to America or here or possibly undocumented. And they know that the restaurant industry is the only industry where they can actually be able to translate some of their skills without necessarily being able to speak fluently in that
Sure.
language. I
Sure.
mean, you can't do that in other industries. So
Right.
you meet so many different people, you hear everyone's stories. And
Yeah.
what it does is it forced me to be mindful of everybody's individual situation,
Yep.
and to really be empathetic as a business owner. If I had gone from business school into owning my own business, I frankly don't know if I would have I don't know if I would have been able to develop the empathy necessary to successfully run a restaurant group.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you're right. And also too, I think you are also exposed to people that have a work ethic that's not really measured as it should be versus other places. I mean, I know you bring up finance, and I feel very fortunate that and we'll go into the 86 struggle in a little bit, but I've been fortunate enough to been able to work from home from March of last year. I haven't missed a paycheck, and that kind of thing. And I know that puts me in a position where, I don't necessarily have the ability to be able to relate to people in those types of circumstances. And so those are the types of people I think you tend to learn, a lot of that from. And it sounds like I think you were attending Johnson and Wales while you were actually working at Denny's. Is that did I get the timing right?
No. So I actually went to Bates College, which is a small liberal arts college up in Maine. And then I left Bates
Oh, because
after a
they're in
year.
Rhode Island.
Yeah, I left
Got
Bates after a year or two because I knew I wanted to just follow through a career within the food service industry. So I traveled around the U.S. working under a handful of different chefs. Eventually, did an apprenticeship out in Oregon under a Swiss master chef out there. Then after a year and a half of doing that, I went back to Johnson and Wales in Colorado. They had just opened up their culinary school, so I went to and translated and got my degree in culinary arts in Denver at the new campus.
Gotcha.
Then I went back and worked for the Ritz-Carlton in Boston. And while I was working for the Ritz-Carlton system, I was going to school simultaneously at Johnson and Wales at their business school in Rhode Island. I was commuting an hour and a half, almost 2 hours every day while working about 60 to 70 hours a week at Johnson and Wales.
Man, that
I
is
was
brutal.
able to get my degree while also working.
Sure. Well, I know. So if the people listening aren't too familiar with Johnson and Wales, I did look up some of their notable alumni, and so Emerald went there. Chris Santos went there, if you guys recognize him from Chopped, and then Tyler Florence went there. I did go to their Wikipedia page, and I noticed that there was a name missing from the notable alumni, and so now Andrew Gruel is actually listed in the notable alumni on their Wikipedia page. I went ahead and I added it then. I've never edited a Wikipedia before, but I'm like, this guy needs to be on there. Why is Chef not listed on there? And so I made the update this morning. So if you go to their Wikipedia, you are now listed on there.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no worries. Until somebody listens to this and they go, well, I don't really like that guy, so I'm just going to delete it out, and then and then maybe it'll disappear.
You're right. That's pretty accurate.
So another thing too that I thought was super interesting is that you did even before I think a lot of people that recognize on cooking networks and things now, is that you also spent some time on TV. I know you were a host on Say It to My Face on the FYI network, and then you also were a judge of the Food Truck Face Off. And can you tell us a little bit of how that worked? You know, as far as was the offer presented to you? Was it something that you pursued? Like how did that kind of work out?
No, I didn't pursue it at all. I mean, I'd always enjoyed like doing media, and even when I was living in Boston, and I opened a restaurant up in New Hampshire, I started a little local radio show, and we did some TV stuff up there. So it was always kind of fun to me.
Sure.
But when we had the food truck, Cooking Channel was doing a show called Eat Street, and they said, "Hey, we want to do an episode and cover you, etc." So they came down, they did a big episode on us, and I got to know all the producers and the camera crew, etc. And I don't know, it was about 6 months later, I got a phone call from a production company out in Canada, and they said, "We're doing a food truck show. We're shooting the pilot for Food Network Canada, Food Network USA. And somebody who was working on a show with Cooking Channel really enjoyed your company, enjoyed your charisma, and now your story. We want to kind of audition you to be one of the the main judges on this show. We're going to shoot a pilot, etc." So
Right.
that was my foray into it, and it was kind of cool because we shot the pilot in LA. Spike Mendelsohn was the host of the show, and then there were two other judges, myself, Steak Shapiro, and Alpana Singh. And then the show did get picked up by both Food Network Canada and Food Network USA. So we did proceed to shoot the entire series thereafter,
That's awesome.
as I was a judge on that.
That's awesome.
So see how these things kind of just snowball from like one little incidence in time.
Sure.
And then I left my contract. I signed a contract with Food Network after that, but then I moved networks to FYI to actually host a show,
Yeah.
a 13 series show, when they were just bought out from A&E, and they were trying to kind of feel their brand out and determine if they wanted to be food or lifestyle, etc. So we were one of the first food shows on the network.
That's awesome. And I think you actually did it with a partner, right? You had a and so now most of those shows nowadays that you see, there's generally just one person, right? Whether it's, you know, Robert Irvine or John Taffer, you know, or Gordon Ramsay or something like that. How did it work out as far as two? Did you guys kind of pair off where you guys were in charge of certain areas, or did you guys, you know, collaborate pretty well?
Yeah, good question. So it was a good friend of mine who was also helping me out and working with me at Slapfish at the time. So we had a lot of natural energy and charisma and kind of spark together. He really focused on the kitchen piece of it, and then I kind of handled the big overall picture of the design, execution, customer service, training. Although I also got involved in the kitchen element there. The premise of the show was putting a bunch of Yelpers in the faces of restaurant
I
owners.
saw that. It was definitely a nice collection of people that were in the restaurant, you know, and you're like, yeah, I feel like those would be a group of people that would really complain and whine about this online.
Yeah. Look, the premise of the show was great. I think it was more just a matter of they didn't want to necessarily invest in that avenue of programming through FYI, so they kind of just let it fizzle out. But
Right.
I thought, I mean, it's like, this was 8 months of filming 14 hours a day, getting to know these restaurant owners. You really develop a relationship with so many people.
Sure.
The crew that put that show together is unbelievable. The showrunner now, she's put forth so many shows that have been bought by Food Network, etc. So in so much as that show never really blew up, we created some amazing relationships, and I thought it was a worthy show.
Yeah, that's great. And also too, because of how you've done such a great job as far as building a community and building those relationships. Do you still stay in touch much at all as far as some of the people that were operating those restaurants?
Yeah. So one of the episodes, Bastards Canteen up in Downey, California, which was owned by, is named Bastards after the Magnificent Bastards, which is a Marine battalion. They were specifically the battalion that actually fought the fiercest battle in Ramadi. The two owners of that, now one, sadly, one of them did pass. He has become a lifelong friend. He now started Save the Brave, which is an organization that I've been promoting for years, and we try and do a lot of work with. And he is just an absolutely unbelievable person. So one relationship from an episode of that show now has spawned, multiple years of friendship and fundraising for his organization, working with veterans with PTSD. And specifically, it's Save the Brave offshore. So he actually takes veterans with PTSD out on fishing boats in order to just unwind and release.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I'll actually include the link to them in the show notes as well. And so we'll have, the 86 struggle and stuff in there, but I'll include that one as well if people
Awesome.
want to check
Thank
it
you.
out.
Thank you.
Because that's definitely a great cause. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like that's a big audience that tends to get overlooked. Not necessarily from a funding perspective, but sometimes just from a relationship, right? And kind of helping to help those guys recover. So that's great.
Yeah.
And that's kind of one. Have you also been, staying in contact with a lot of the people that you have built in relationships over the years? Because I know you've also done guest appearances on different shows, and you do a lot of media as far as television and radio. Is that something that just has always come natural to you in terms of being able to build up and maintain and keep those relationships through the years?
Yeah. I mean, I think the difference with myself, I've passed on a lot of opportunities because I'm still a working, living executive chef, right? Like I'm not a media chef, so I don't have the opportunity to go and spend 5 days in New York City playing.
Right. That was going to be my next question. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was a juncture in my career where I was offered an opportunity to do a much bigger, higher profile show, but I would have had to have given up on my role within the enterprise, running the organization, running the restaurants. I could have been, involved from a subsidiary level, but I'm not ready to do that. Right. I'm in this because I love it. I eat it. I sleep it. I breathe it. It's a family business, a family affair. So I passed on that. Right. It really came down to kind of vanity and versus passion.
Yeah. Right.
But I still try and remain involved through judging appearances, radio,
Sure.
Short-lived media hits.
No, that's great. And I know too, one of the things that brought us two together, which is your recent project, which is the 86 struggle, which, by the way, I see that you've got the website built up for it now, rather than just kind of a link to the GoFundMe. And so, which the website looks great. I know you guys put that together on pretty short notice. As far as being able to manage the restaurant empire, your media appearances, having 4 kids, when did you decide this is a cause that I want to take on? There are people out here that are struggling, that really need support, that they need help. I've got all of this going on, but now I want to be able to prioritize and be able to help these folks, whether it's $600 or $2,000, whatever I can do to help these guys. How did that end up working out?
There was really no structure or formula to it. It was 100%, and I hate to use this cliche, but it truly was organic. It grew out of an ask amongst many of our staff and team members who either work for us right now or had worked for us, who had reached out and said, hey, I either need a job, I need hours, I need help financially. Can you point me in the right direction? We've been a pillar to many of these people when they need to reach out, if they need help within the community. And there was just such a demand for help without a real supply. So we said, well, maybe we can bridge the gap and we can provide a little bit of that supply by heralding a message and ask, if you will, across our network. And we can generate perhaps $5,000 to help the 10 or 15 people that we were directly communicating with.
Right.
And then that's where it spiraled and it snowballed. And once you start, if you truly are somebody who feeds the need, and I mean that in a grander way, you don't stop, right? Like,
absolutely,
you don't hit a benchmark. There truly is no benchmark. And that's where now it's just kind of grown into a much bigger project over a short period of time.
Yeah, I mean, obviously big enough project to where you guys now have a dedicated website for it, where I know that there's stories on there, and it has a link to the the fundraiser and stuff like that itself. And how does the process work? So if somebody's listening and they're saying, hey, you know what, I'm in this situation, I could use it. I work in hospitality. I know you being in Southern California, you guys have obviously seen this play out differently than people in the rest of the country, but sometimes, in some retrospects, even worse. What would be your suggestion for people that might be in that situation that could use a little bit of that help or aid?
They can't find help elsewhere. I mean, go onto our website, go onto the GoFundMe. There's an application on the GoFundMe. All you're going to fill out is very basic information. And we obviously cross-reference previous employers, pay stubs, et cetera, to make sure that the story is aligned. Unfortunately, there are some scammers out there. So we've got to do our diligence, which is respectful to the people who are donating. And from there, we'll work with you and see what we can do to kind of help bridge some of these financial gaps, whether it's paying a rent bill or a utility bill or just giving you extra spending money in order to catch up on credit or food on the table, helping the
Sure.
kids out. So many different situations. It's really that simple. I mean, and it's just my wife and I communicating, making sure that we can handle this appropriately with the recipient, and that's it.
Yeah, and I think too, I remember seeing some of the stories around Christmas time. I mean, they're really warm stories where they're like, "Hey, you guys are helping me to be able to buy Christmas presents for my, for my kids." And stuff like that. I mean, that's a lifelong impact that you and your wife are being able to make. And I think too, as far as the process goes, because obviously you have a lot else going on, is Lauren, is she the one that generally tends to do a lot of the vetting and some of the research? I know you post some videos and stuff on Twitter or whatever of her kind of sitting over on the couch, and she's got a baby in one hand and she's got her computer on the other one. And I feel like that's probably what she's doing, right? Like she's doing a lot of the legwork here to make sure that these funds are going to the right places.
Oh yeah. And she's got a heavier filter than I do. I've been duped a couple times, and she's like, "You're not allowed to distribute the money."
She takes
and
the purse away from you.
I'm not saying I've been duped like to the degree that they were fake people, but either like they fudged some of it, they weren't in the restaurant industry, or we almost got caught double paying people and they weren't going to say anything, double applications.
Sure.
So she's just totally like cut me off. I will now work directly with restaurant owners, right? Gotcha. So one way that it's all about efficiency. And
yeah, absolutely.
Whenever I start a new project, it's like, how can we be more efficient with this? So what we've been doing now is, in addition to accepting applications, restaurant owners are reaching out and saying, "Hey, I'm going to shut down. I've got 12 employees I'm about to furlough, lay off, etc. Right. Can you do anything to help these 12? Here's a redacted file of their info. I can confirm, I can blah, blah, blah." That's much easier. Bam, we can send out 12 checks. Yeah. We can confirm 12 people. We can help a chunk of people in one fell swoop.
Yeah, no, that's great.
My angle.
And I think too, last I saw, you guys were up over like right about $310,000, which, I mean, if your original goal was $5,000, to help out a handful of people, I mean, you've far beyond exceeded any type of expectation. I know that there's been some folks out there too. I believe Robert Irvine was one. I think Guy Fieri was also one. How has the response been in the community in terms of this type of a fundraiser? Has it really been, well received from that group of folks?
Yeah, it's been very well received. Obviously the stories help. It's real. It's authentic. It's grassroots. We're talking about donations from $5 to $25 on average.
Right.
We're not garnering the millions of dollars that an organization like a Barstool might, but they're also helping restaurants that need hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right.
And we have this bottom-up approach. But we got a seed investment at about $100,000. It was Marcus Lemonis.
Yes, I remember that.
$5,000 in.
Mm-hmm.
But we've gotten support from, once again, of course, Robert Irvine. He's been huge. He's been writing me frequently about this. John Gordon, who's a best-selling author and an inspirational guy. He's the one who really drove me to do this.
That's great.
Through Twitter messaging.
Yeah.
But a lot of baseball players, Kevin Youkilis, Kyle Higashioka, a lot of people are really helping out and helping to spread the word. And that's the most important thing, because it's not always about the money, right?
Right.
About getting a platform built upon which we can then herald and amplify a louder message.
Absolutely.
To people that can make a difference.
Right.
People who have disposable income in amounts that they want to give away. We got an anonymous $20,000 donation.
That was me. No, it wasn't me. No, it wasn't. But that's awesome. That's great.
But how does so break that down, right? How does it get to that anonymous person? Well, it gets there through this social effect, right? Yep. And they weren't looking for accolades. They weren't looking for high fives. Clearly, they wanted to truly help the cause. Well, it could have been 50 shares that got there, right?
Yeah. With
no donations. So when somebody clicks retweet, share, etc., that's a lot more valuable than people imagine.
Yeah, no, that's great. And now again, you being in Southern California, you guys are pretty much at the epicenter as far as, lockdowns go, outdoor dining bans, that type of thing. having your ear to the ground, how do you see this kind of playing out over the next 3 months, 6 months, that kind of thing? Do you guys kind of see a bit of an end in sight where you're like, hey, we can't stop fundraising, we can't stop helping these guys, but we're hoping, by summertime that we should start to see this rebound? Any indication from any of that?
There's certainly indications, right? And you're starting to see some of the murmurs I've posted about it, where a lot of the leaders that once were very pro lockdown are saying we've got to open up the economy, from Cuomo to Lori Lightfoot,
right? Yeah,
and a few other elected officials.
Yeah, articles coming out like Newsweek and stuff too, talking about how they're not working out. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yep, of course. But what we need to understand, right? The same way it occurs in the grand macroeconomic sense, there's always a lag.
Yeah.
So let's just say the lockdown stopped now. There's going to be a lag. The applications are going to keep coming in for 4 to 6 weeks potentially before even the unemployment benefits have started to kick in.
Yeah.
Part of the problem is that a lot of these unemployment systems are so mismanaged that they're in quagmire. They're in a complete gridlock. So
$10 billion, right? $10 billion kind of left the state in waste and stuff like that. Yeah.
Outrageous. It's outrageous.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so we feel that we need to just keep raising.
Yeah.
Until we start to see a decline, not in cases, but until we start to see a decline in applications, we're not going to feel comfortable slowing down.
Sure. No, I agree 100%. And I think too, one of the other concerns that sometimes people aren't thinking about, like you said before, where you had spoken to some owners that are like, hey, I'm going to have to lay people off, I'm going to have to furlough folks. That job may never come back. And so even if restaurants do open, that doesn't necessarily mean that those positions are going to come back. And so I think, to your point, you're going to have to bridge, or, we will, as a community and together try to help those folks until, new money comes back in and opens up some new places and they go back to kind of rehiring again. Yeah, that's a great point. Well, we're wrapping up here. Do you have anything specific that you definitely I know you want to plug your social media, and if you don't follow Chef, you got to, because he posts awesome looking food. I swear I wake up in the morning and you post a picture of shrimp and it's 7 o'clock in the morning and I'm craving shrimp or lobster or, or whatever it might be. But is there anything kind of specific you'd like to go out on?
No. Thank you, first of all, for all of your support. Thank you for the education. You're a great follow. You've got some really interesting tidbits, and
thank you.
You can add the things. I mean, I have the tendency sometimes to just splash emotion across social media.
That's okay.
It's not always pragmatic, but it's good to be given some guardrails.
Sure.
I just, I implore everybody to help their own community out. There's a lot of ways you can do so without spending money, right?
Sure.
Sharing and engaging on any local restaurant social media is huge in order to break through the Silicon Valley algorithms. Engagement is always the key, right? So that's important. Gift cards, leaving restaurants positive Yelp reviews or any Google reviews. Those are also important. These are real important ways to help local restaurants without necessarily donating if you don't have the money.
Yeah. And do pickup, right? Do pickup. Don't necessarily order through delivery services.
If you can. And I don't want to shame people that do, because a lot of people are not able to.
Correct.
But if given the option, always understand that when you do order from a third-party delivery, you're taking 30 cents on every dollar and giving it to the third-party delivery app.
Right. Yeah. And that does tend to be one of those things that people, they're like, oh, well, I'm ordering food from them because I want to help. And they don't necessarily understand some of the mechanics behind it. But you're right. There are certainly conditions where people just don't have the option, or they don't have the ability to, that kind of thing. Yeah. Well, Chef, I super appreciate you coming on. It was a great time. I was super excited whenever when you wanted to chat, because I know I don't really get the opportunity to learn from somebody of your stature as far as the business and the industry, and then anything that I can also do to help promote. We talk a lot about building community and really being able to help those people that really need it when we have the means to do so. And so you're literally the living embodiment of that, as far as, with the 86 struggle. So I really appreciate you coming on. I know you're a busy man. And so I'll respect the rest of your time. And we'll talk later, and we'll definitely keep everybody up to date on how things are going.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
You got it. All right. Thanks, Chef.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.